Somewhere in a forest right now, a tree is under attack. Insects chewing through its leaves, one bite at a time. Within hours, trees nearby that were never touched begin producing defensive chemicals of their own, as if bracing for an attack that hasn't reached them yet. They weren't warned by the wind. They weren't warned by sound because trees have no way to make any. The message traveled underground through a network most people walk over every single day without ever suspecting it exists. For most of scientific history, a forest was treated as a simple collection of individual trees, quietly competing for the same sunlight and the same soil. That picture turns out to be almost entirely wrong. Underneath the ground you're standing on, an ancient, living internet has been running for hundreds of millions of years, trading resources, sending warnings, and in some cases, quietly keeping the weakest trees alive. Once you understand how it works, you'll never look at a forest floor the same way again. The connection isn't built by the trees themselves, it's built by fungi. Specifically a category called mycorrhizal fungi, which form partnerships with tree roots that go back roughly 450 million years, close to the very origin of land plants. The fungus grows in thin thread-like filaments called hyphae, wrapping around and sometimes penetrating a tree's root cells. In exchange for a steady supply of sugar that the tree produces through photosynthesis, the fungus extends the tree's effective reach into the soil by an enormous margin, accessing water and mineral nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen far beyond what the tree's own roots could ever reach alone. Here's the part that changes everything. Those fungal threads don't just connect to one tree. A single fungal network can link the root systems of dozens, sometimes hundreds of separate trees, including different species entirely, into one continuous underground structure. Researchers eventually gave it a name that stuck far beyond scientific papers: the Wood Wide Web. One of the most striking discoveries in this field came from ecologist Suzanne Simard, who spent decades studying forests in Western Canada. Her research revealed that certain large old trees function almost like hubs at the center of these fungal networks, trees she began calling mother trees. Using radioactive carbon isotopes as tracers, Simard's team could literally watch carbon move between trees through the fungal network in real time. Older, larger trees with greater access to sunlight were found sending measurable amounts of carbon towards smaller, shaded seedlings struggling nearby, including seedlings that weren't even their own direct offspring. In some cases, dying trees were recorded dumping a significant portion of their remaining carbon and resources into the network shortly before death, effectively passing on what they had left to their neighbors. This wasn't a one-time curiosity. Later studies found that these mother trees appeared to preferentially direct more resources toward their own genetic offspring when they could distinguish them from unrelated seedlings nearby, suggesting some form of kin recognition operating entirely underground without a single visible signal above the surface. The network doesn't just move nutrients, it moves information. In controlled experiments, researchers exposed one tree to insect damage or infection, and then closely monitored nearby trees connected through the same fungal network. Within a relatively short window, the connected neighboring trees began ramping up production of defensive compounds, chemicals that make their leaves less palatable or actively toxic to attacking insects, even though those neighboring trees had never been touched. Trees that were deliberately kept unconnected to the network, planted nearby but without an intact fungal link, showed no such early response. The signal appears to travel specifically through the fungal threads themselves, not simply through the soil or the air. This has led some researchers to describe the underground network using language borrowed directly from computing and biology combined. An early warning system, distributing threat information across an entire community faster than any individual tree could detect danger on its own. It would be easy to romanticize this as pure forest cooperation, but the underground story is considerably messier than that, and that complexity is part of what makes it genuinely fascinating. The fungi themselves aren't acting out of altruism. They're extracting a steady, real cost in sugar from every tree they connect to, and different fungal species compete fiercely with each other for access to the most productive root systems. Some plant species have also been found exploiting the network in the opposite direction. Certain non-photosynthesizing plants, sometimes called mycoheterotrophs, tap directly into the fungal network and pull carbon and nutrients from surrounding trees without ever contributing anything back. They're effectively siphoning resources through a system built for exchange, without holding up their end of it. Even among trees themselves, the network doesn't guarantee equal treatment. Larger, more established trees generally connect to more fungal partners and occupy more central positions within the network, giving them disproportionate access to shared resources, not unlike how certain nodes in a human social or communication network end up more influential than others simply because of how many connections they hold. For most of the 20th century, forestry and ecology largely treated a forest as a straightforward economic contest, trees individually racing each other for light, water, and space, with the strongest simply outcompeting the weakest. The discovery of these fungal networks doesn't erase that competition, but it adds an entire hidden layer operating alongside it. A struggling seedling in deep shade, seemingly losing every straightforward contest for sunlight, might still be receiving a quiet subsidy of carbon through fungal connections to larger trees nearby. Support invisible to anyone simply looking at the forest from above ground. This has real practical implications. Some foresters and land managers have started reconsidering standard clear-cutting practices, since removing all the mature hub trees from an area doesn't just remove those individual trees. It can potentially collapse large sections of the underground network that younger surrounding trees had been quietly depending on. The science here is still actively developing, and researchers continue to debate exactly how widespread and how significant carbon-sharing behavior is across different forest types worldwide. But the core discovery is no longer seriously disputed. Forests are not simply collections of individual competitors. They're partially functioning as a single, loosely connected underground system, one that shares, warns, and in some cases, quietly redistributes resources toward whichever members happen to need them most. So the next time you walk through a forest, what's happening beneath your feet is far busier than anything visible above it. A vast ancient fungal network is quietly moving sugar toward a shaded seedling that can't yet make enough of its own. Somewhere nearby, a damaged tree may already be sending out a chemical warning that's reaching its neighbors before any visible sign of the attack does. None of it required a brain, a nervous system, or anything resembling intention in the way we usually think about communication. It required something older and, in its own way, more efficient. A network built from fungal threads running underground for hundreds of millions of years, long before anything with a brain ever walked across the forest floor above it. This has been the Reasonary, where curiosity meets clarity.